What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to the Royal Flash Pinball series. Sorry it's been a little bit of a wait on the second video here. I was actually waiting on parts for a repair that came up shortly after the last video, which I'll explain here in a minute. But it was a perfect opportunity to wait for those parts to get here, because for part 2, I wanted to show you inside the machine. So I'll first show you how we get inside the machine, and this is pretty much standard for all machines as far as removing. What we're first going to do is open the door, and one thing I wanted to mention is if you don't have the key, I didn't have the key to my door, but you have to be able to get inside. And so a lot of people will just bend the crap out of these and basically break the door open. I wanted to be a little bit more careful than that. There are various methods to kind of jiggle around in here and get the lock open. This is a unique Chicago coin lock where it's double tumblers, and so that's basically impossible unless you're a locksmith or a criminal. So the other way, and this is how I got in, is I pried with a screwdriver right in here to make a little bit of a gap. I didn't pry hard enough to damage the door, but I pry it a little bit to get a gap there, and then you've got your lock bar. Basically, it's a flat tab, maybe an inch wide and a half inch wide, an inch long, that goes across here. I took a hacksaw blade just by hand with a glove on, and I was able to cut through, just feed it through the slot and cut through that lock tab, and I can show you more so what that looks like here. Just like that. And as soon as I cut through that, it opened up. Now if I ever wanted to put a lock on this, I would just remove this screw, take the tab off, and remove the nut to replace the lock. But for my purposes, that would be much more annoying than not having a lock, is to lock and unlock the machine all the time. So anyway, as far as getting in the machine, you're going to open your door. You'll have, depending on the manufacturer, you'll have a lock bar here. And so mine, I knock it to the right to unlock the lock bar, like that. And I like to knock it. It's easier than pushing on this and then busting your hand. So once you've done that, I'll zoom out a little bit here. You'll be able to lift the lock bar and shooter assembly out, like so. And then the next step is very carefully to slide the glass out. And so you can just slide this. I'm going to put the camera down and use two hands, but you'll just slide this out. And common advice is to hold on to the sides versus grabbing it. That way you don't get fingerprints all over it. So I'm very carefully going to slide this out and set it against the wall here, and then I'll turn the camera back on and show you the next step. So once we've got the glass slid out and set aside carefully, you can then lift up the playfield. This is just going to hinge upward, and this also varies by manufacturer. Some of them are on hinges, some of them you slide out and then hinge. In my case, I'm just going to lift it up. It's actually not attached in the back there, so you can slide it forward if you want, but there's an awful lot of electrical going on, and there's no reason that you would want to do that. All we're doing here is pivoting it up, and then there's a prop rod on the right side where we'll prop it up. So I'll try to do this one-handed, but it is heavy. So you can either grab under the apron here, or I like to grab these two tabs here, but one-handed is going to be a little bit different. So there we go. I wouldn't recommend doing that one-handed. You risk dropping it, and that would be a disaster. Now, excuse the camera for a second, but I'm just going to grab this prop rod and put it in the hole right there. There's two different spots here, depending on how high up you want to go. So I'm just going to go to the lower, or actually what would be the higher position, I guess. Like so. So let me adjust the lighting here a little bit, and I'll kind of give you a tour of what the guts are, what they're doing, and just in a nutshell how things work. I'm definitely not an expert, but over the last month of working on it, I've learned a little bit. So 1 second on that. We'll be right back. Okay, so taking a look inside, we'll start with the cabinet. So this would be the cabinet down here, and then this would be the play field. So we'll work our way. And one other component that's going to have a lot of guts is the back box. So we've got the cabinet talking to the play field, talking to the back box back there. So starting down here with the cabinet in the back, on my unit in particular, this is the tilt unit, as well as a few adjustments, and I'll explain that in a second. So tilt is a classic pinball term and function where it's basically a way of a security feature, I would say, of making sure that if your game is in a store somewhere and you're not at home playing it or standing there monitoring the machine, people aren't getting too rough with it and damaging the machine, or getting too rough in a way to win all sorts of points that they shouldn't be able to win through standard operation. So the way that this tilt works, there are multiple tilt or shutdown functions. One is the classic plumb bob tilt right here. So this is simply hanging inside of a metal ring attached to a power wire, and when the plumb bob touches the ring, it shorts out and shuts off. It actually, the way mine is set, and I can show you this in the back, this is where that setting is at, but the way mine is set is that this will end that ball. So if you're in 3-ball play, you'll be playing through, maybe you're on ball 2, you accidentally bump the machine too hard, it will then move on to ball 3. It'll just drain, you'll lose all functionality. There is a way to set this up to end the entire game, and I can show you that in a second. And so that's how that operates. Another form of tilt is on this trough switch right here. So what this is if you grab the front of the machine and pick it up and try to keep the ball from draining through gravity, this will roll forward. This is actually just another pinball. And it will hit this switch, and that one is set up to end the game, because that's a little bit more severe of an offense to pick up the machine and cause that to roll forward. The tilt down here is actually considered sort of a normal function of the game, to kind of gently shake or move the machine around or bump it, things like that. That's part of the game, so that's why this one is a lesser offense, and you can set it. It's more adjustable for allowing the tilt to function a little bit more if you want it to. There is another option, actually 2 more shutdown options. There would typically be a mercury switch in this machine, and I'm not 100% what that's for. I think it is a tilt function as well, similar to the trough switch, but maybe just a little bit more sensitive, where there would be a little vial full of mercury, and if you tipped that, that would cause issue. I'm pretty sure. If somebody knows better, let us know down in the comments below. And then finally, there's a couple of slap switches. Slap is the wrong word, but I can't think of the correct word for these switches. But these are on the coin door, and so if you are banging on this, trying to maybe get inside, these have little weights on the top of them, and these weights will shake like so, and that's a form of shutting down the game. Mine is not functional because I also don't have the coin mechanisms in this game. So as part of removing those, these switches were disabled. I can't think of the word. It's not slap, something else. If somebody else can think of it, let us know that down in the comments as well. Okay, moving on. So we'll take a look. Here we have our total play counter. So that indicates the total number of plays that the game has. Mine is not functional, but it died, who knows, however many years ago at almost 80,000 plays. So that's quite a bit. I'll just give a quick rundown, let's start at the back left, a quick rundown each row of what's happening. And so these 2 rows, these are all of our coils and switches, And that's basically the way that these electromechanical machines work. And if I can remember to do it, there's another channel that has an excellent, very interesting and entertaining explanation of how everything works in an EM pinball machine. And I'll try to remember to link that, because that will be far better viewing material than what I have for you. So anyway, the way that these work is this coil is energized. These are all the same. This coil is energized and pulls in, and these two leaf switches on this one in particular are then either engaged or disengaged. And so electricity is flowing either through them or not through them, depending on if the coil is energized. And the nice thing is these are all labeled. So we have our special control that's related to the special feature in the game, another special relay. We've got the bonus, and then we have our point relays. So we have our 20 and our 50 relays. Those are related to that number of points. That's when those are going to engage. These being labeled is so helpful, because when you're working through trying to figure out a function that's not working in the game, a lot of times you can go right to that relay and find the issue. And if you're new to one of these machines, the way I was not long ago, one of the number one things to start with is cleaning and adjusting all of these switches. And I'm going to kind of zoom in and show you what I mean by that. So let's take a look at this. This is a big one. Let's go over here to the bank reset relay. So if you were just looking in here and you had no idea what you were doing, but your game wasn't working properly, here's what you would do, and here's what I did. So looking in here, you can identify which switches are supposed to be open and closed. This is a bad example because these are all normally open. So normally is basically when the machine is off, what position are those switches in? And they're open, so they're normally open. Then, when this gets pulled in, they're all normally closed. So you would just go through and make sure when this is pulled in or manually pushed in by hand, are all of those switches closing. And if, let's say, this leaf switch on the end was bent in like this, and when you closed this it didn't make contact, you would lightly, down at the bottom, just push on this to bend it to the point where they all make contact, and then also making sure that they all disengage in the off position. Let me show you an example of a combination switch. So right next to it here on the tilt relay, this is an example of a normally closed contact and two normally open contacts. You know that because when you push this to engage or energize the relay, this is pulling away from this contact. So the moving contact is pulling away, where on these two, the moving contacts are getting closer. So you know that when it's normally off, in its normal position, this is normally closed, and these two are normally open. And then when it pulls in, they change. So you would want to go through and make sure that these are functioning in that manner. Along with making those appropriate adjustments, you want to make sure everything is clean. And so what I did is, for general cleaning, I took a Q-tip with a little bit of alcohol, rubbing alcohol on it, and I would just put it between all the contacts and kind of rub it to take all the carbon, the old carbon off of those contacts. In some cases, where a contact needed more severe cleaning, I would use a small file, put the file down in there, and push the contacts against the file and gently polish it up. And that made a world of difference. I would go from having no functionality of certain things to everything working 100%. So that was great. Okay, working over here to the right, this is our player control motor. And so basically the main function of this will spin around, and when it does, it changes the state of these switches. So when these ridges come up, it hits the switch and it moves the switch that it's coming in contact with. It's really cool the way that this works. But its main function, being the player control motor, is to control ball and player. So if you're player 1, ball 1, for example, and your ball drains, the out hole relay, which is the relay that's energized when the ball drains, would then talk to this and advance it to advance from player 1, ball 1, if you're in 2-player, over to player 2, ball 1, and so on. If you're in 1-player, it would go from, it'd basically be your ball control motor. And it would go from ball 1 to ball 2 to ball 3, that sort of thing. So this is really cool. And I'll try and show you in the next video these things in action. We'll turn on the machine and we'll do a few things while the machine is on and keep it open, and I'll show you these things actually functioning. And then finally, for the cabinet, well, almost, we have one other thing. Moving back here to this giant monstrosity, this is the score motor. And so if you take a look here at the labels, we have our, well, I take that back. I'm calling it the score motor, but it's kind of unique how it's functioning. And this is another area where you're going to want to watch that other video that I had mentioned for more in-depth and accurate explanation. But basically, through the functions of the game, this is talking to the score relays for each individual reel, where we had our 20 and our 50 and so on. And the way that this works is it has these banks of switches, tons of them, and it moves vertically. So these two coils on each end will pull up, and this whole thing pulls up and engages the switches in that bank. And then it also has plungers back here that will knock it either back down or to its next step. So there are multiple steps where these switches will move up and get stuck, and then this will kick it down and it'll fall down, and it's really cool. So hopefully we can watch that operate in the next video as well. Finally, for the cabinet, this is the chime unit or bell unit, etc. And we have basically our 1-point bell, and so every time you get a single point item, this will ding. The way it dings is there's a coil down here with a metal plunger, and it shoots that plunger up to hit the bell and make it ring. Over here we have our 10-point and up relay. So our 10s, 20s, 50s, 100s, 200s, and so on. That is a much larger, louder bell. And then finally here we have our knocker. And what the knocker is attached to the cabinet is this metal bracket and the same coil basically that operates the bells, but it will hit this and make a loud knock. And there are different features throughout the game where you'll achieve a knock. So anyway, that's it for the cabinet, and I think that's going to do it for this video so it doesn't get too lengthy. In the next video, we'll move up and take a look at the bottom of the play field, everything that's going on here, and then finally take a look in the back box at our score reels and lights and all of that sort of thing. So thanks a lot for watching. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave those down below. Otherwise, like and subscribe as always. And we'll see you on the next video.